Hello everyone, so welcome back to another video from our series Alekhine vs Capablanca World Chess Championship. So the game 31 ended in a draw, and up till now Capablanca has won 3 matches and Alekhine has won 4 matches, and the rest other games all have been a draw. So this is game number 32, and Alekhine is with the white pieces and the Capablanca is with the black pieces. So without further ado, let's get started. Uh, so Capablanca opens, Alekhine opens with d4. Capablanca replies knight f6, c4, e6, knight c3, and d5. The queen's gambit decline line. Alekhine goes for bishop g5, knight b2 d7, e3, c6, and sorry about that, c cross d5 and e cross d5. So Alekhine now develops the light square bishop to bishop d3, and Capablanca develops his dark square bishop to bishop e7. And up till now in the games they have went for knight c3, knight f3, but in this game Alekhine goes for knight g to e2. So now black castles and knight g3. So developing the knight this way, maybe some new theory, maybe Alekhine has uh, prepared for something new over this time. So knight back to e8 and h4. Not exchanging the bishop, but rather playing h4. Maybe just to surprise Capablanca, and here Capablanca replies with knight d2 f6. So now Alekhine goes queen c2 and bishop e6. Knight f5 and bishop cross f5. Bishop cross f5 and knight d6, and now bishop back to d3. So h6 and now bishop back to f4. So not exchanging the bishop for the knight. Now rook c8 and g4. So I guess Capablanca Alekhine is not planning to castle and launches this attack right away. So knight f to e4 and g5. Trying to open the Alekhine king, to which Capablanca declined and plays h5. So now bishop cross e4 and knight cross e4. Knight cross e4 and d cross e4 and queen cross e4. So after the exchange, I think so I think Alekhine is up a pawn after this exchange. Yeah. Now Capablanca plays queen a5 check, and Alekhine replies with king to f1. Here if king e2 is also not a bad move, but the better move is king f1 only. So queen d5 trying to exchange the queens, and Alekhine accepts the queen exchange. So queen cross d5, c cross d5. Now king to g2 and rook to c2, and now Alekhine offers an exchange of one pair of rooks. So rook h2 c1, and here Capablanca goes for rook f c8. So if Capablanca has gone for the pawn, then this doesn't work because now rook a to b1, and if rook cross b1, rook cross b1, now you kind of attack this pawn b6 and rook c1. Now you have a threat of this and try to win back the. Now you have threat of taking the bishop, so this way you will be able to get the pawn back, and opponent will have two isolated pawns against the very strong pawn chain of the white. So maybe that's why it's not good to take away the. So Capablanca plays rook f to c8 and rook cross c2. So now rook b1 protecting the pawn. Now this doesn't work maybe. Yeah. Now you can't bring the rook over here, otherwise it will simply. It's a beautiful piece blunder that opponent will be very happy. So now rook b1 and king h7. King g3 trying to improve the position of the king, and king g6, f3 and f6 trying to break the pawn chain, and Alekhine does take g cross f6, and Capablanca takes with the bishop. I think you can also take with the pawn, but taking with the pawn will lead you to three isolated pawns. So bishop cross f6 and a4, king f5 and a5. So Alekhine pushes the pawn. So rook e2, rook e2 trying to maybe push, maybe with the idea with pushing this pawn and trying to remove the defender of the pawn and taking the pawn. So if move something else, then maybe this doesn't work. A cross b5, bishop cross b5. This doesn't work, but maybe similar idea. So rook to e2, and Capablanca goes, Alekhine goes rook c1. So now Capablanca takes the b2 pawn, rook cross b2, and now rook c5, trying to attack the weak pawn on d5. and to which Capablanca replies king to e2. So now e4, and now this gives Capablanca this pawn. So bishop cross bishop cross e4, and now rook cross d5, and now bishop to c3. So and bishop taking the bishop out of the harm's way, and also attacking the pawn, also attacking the weak pawn on a5. So Capablanca's first takes the pawn on h5, and Capablanca goes a6. Maybe rook b8. If rook b8, then simply rook to b5, and if you take here, then rather to take the rook, you can also take this pawn and also attack this pawn, and in the end you will. So maybe that's why. So that's why maybe Alekhine Capablanca pushes a6. Yeah. So now bishop c7, adding one more protection to the pawn, and first bishop e1 check and king g4. King rook g2 check and king h3. So also attacking the rook. So rook f2 and king g4. You need to protect the pawn. So now once again rook g2 check, and once again king g3, rook f2, and f4. Now this pawn is protected by the bishop, but rook f3 check and king g2. Rook f2 check and king h3, rook f3 check, king g2, rook f2 check and king g1, trying to repeat, but Alekhine don't want to draw, as he is up a pawn and he is with the white pieces. So rook c2 attacking the bishop, and bishop b6. Rook c4 attacking the pawn on e4 now, but just king g6 and g6, king g2 and g6 by Capablanca. Alekhine first goes for this check, rook e5 check, and the king has to go back. So king d7 and h5. So g cross h5, and first king f3, and now h4. Now rook h5, putting the rook behind this pass pawn. So first Capablanca goes for rook c3 check and king g4. Very important square to protect, so that the rook can't protect the pawn. So rook c4, now attacking the pawn on e4 once again, to which Alekhine replies king f5, because these are very two important pass pawns, so it's very important to protect it, and as the bishop is guarding the c5 square, so there are no annoying check by the rook. So here Capablanca goes for bishop a5. So maybe with the idea that if bishop cross a5, then maybe hoping that Alekhine would make this mistake of going to king h5 and trying to protect this protect the rook and also protecting the bishop. But here he Capablanca just plays rook cross h5, and now the king has, if king doesn't take, uh, then the Capablanca would be upper rook, and if king takes the rook, then simply h3, and the king can't chase. Yeah, so the king can't chase the pawn from queening. So uh, a gamble by Capablanca, but I think it doesn't work. It didn't work because as Alekhine first gives this check, and now king c6, and now bishop cross a5. Again trying to go with the plan, rook c5 check, but simply king e6, and here Capablanca takes the bishop, rook cross a5 and f5. So now Capablanca brings the rook to a3, trying to protect this pawn, but if this pawn is taken, then also Alekhine is in the lead, but Alekhine straight away pushes the pawn f6, and Capablanca has to block, put a rook behind this pawn to avoid from queening, but simply f7, and now b5, and rook h5, h3 by Capablanca now, and rook f5. So blocking the rook, and trying to exchange the rook, because now if rooks are exchanged, then rook cross c5 and which happened in the game. But instead, if not the e4, I guess this was also winning. But in the game, Alekhine plays rook h5, h3, and rook f5, blocking the Capablanca's rook, and rook cross, and Capablanca does take the rook. Oh, sorry. Rook cross f5 and e cross f5, and in this position, Yes, in this position, Capablanca resigns, and Alekhine once again wins this match, and now Alekhine is once again in 2 points of lead. So because here you simply, if you push h2 and then h3 queen and now you queen, then there is this wonderful check, and once the queen move you can take the queen. So this is completely winning position for white, and after this move Capablanca resigns the game, and Alekhine won this match. So hope you like it. Leave a like, share and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and hope to see you in the next one.